It was a quiet night in a small roadside diner when Emily, a poor young waitress working a double shift, noticed a strange man sitting in the corner who wouldn't stop staring at her, his eyes following her every move, his grin cold and unsettling. She tried to ignore it, but when she went to refill his coffee, he whispered something that made her blood run cold, confirming her worst fear: he'd been following her for days. Just as panic began to rise in her chest, the door swung open and a group of Hell's Angels bikers stomped in from the rain, their leader, a massive man named Bear, giving her a nod of recognition. With trembling lips, Emily leaned toward him and whispered, "He won't stop following me." Bear's expression didn't change, but the entire diner seemed to freeze as he stood up, towering over the stalker's booth. The man tried to act tough, but Bear's calm, rumbling voice cut through the tension like thunder. "You got a problem with my friend?" The stalker stammered, his confidence evaporating as Bear leaned closer and said quietly, "You're done here. Don't let me see you again." Within seconds, the man bolted out of the diner, leaving his half-finished coffee behind. The room was silent until Bear turned back to Emily, gave her a reassuring nod, and sat down like nothing had happened. Later that night, he escorted her home safely, and when police arrested the stalker days later, everyone in town knew the truth. Sometimes angels don't wear wings, sometimes they wear leather jackets and ride Harley-Davidsons. Days passed since that terrifying night in the diner, but Emily couldn't shake the feeling that the man who had followed her might come back, the way his cold eyes had pierced through her, the sound of his coffee cup sliding across the table when Bear had confronted him. It all replayed in her mind like a nightmare she couldn't wake from. Yet every evening, without fail, the low, familiar rumble of Harley-Davidsons echoed outside the diner, and Emily would look up to see Bear and his crew roll in like guardians of the night, their leather jackets glistening from the rain, their presence enough to silence even the loudest drunks. The first few nights, Bear didn't say much, he'd just nod at her, drink his black coffee, and leave a $20 bill under his cup. But one night, as she cleared his table, he looked up and asked in that deep, gravelly voice, "You sleepin' okay?" The question startled her. No one had asked her that in months, and all she could do was nod and whisper, "Better now." What she didn't know was that Bear had done more than just scare the stalker away, he had found out who the man was. Turns out, the creep wasn't some random stranger, he was an ex-con from a nearby town with a record of harassment and assault, recently released and drifting from place to place. When Bear discovered this, he quietly made some calls, people he knew from the road, folks who didn't trust the law but believed in justice. Within days, word spread through the biker network that this man had crossed a line, and wherever he went, doors closed, people turned away, and engines roared in warning behind him. He disappeared completely soon after. Meanwhile, Emily's life began to change. For the first time in years, she felt safe walking home, because every night she could hear the faint sound of motorcycles idling near the diner's parking lot, like watchful guardians in the dark. The regulars started to notice too, rough bikers sitting in silence, sipping coffee, tipping generously, never causing trouble, and soon, the town's opinion of the Hells Angels began to shift. Parents who once crossed the street to avoid them now nodded respectfully. The diner became a strange kind of safe haven, a place where truckers, bikers, and small-town folk sat side by side without fear. Emily started smiling more, laughing again, even singing along to the jukebox while she worked. One night, as she closed up, she found a small envelope tucked under a napkin with her name on it. Inside was a folded note in Bear's rough handwriting, "You ever feel unsafe again, just step outside and listen. We'll be there." Tears welled in her eyes as she looked out the window to see the glow of tail lights fading into the night. Months later, she heard that Bear and his crew had moved on to another town, helping at a local shelter and protecting waitresses, clerks, and women who couldn't defend themselves. She never saw him again, but sometimes, when the wind carried the distant echo of motorcycles down Route 66, Emily would stop, smile softly, and whisper, "Thank you." Because she knew, in a world full of cruelty and fear, there were still angels out there, they just happened to ride Harleys and wear black leather instead of white wings. Years passed since that unforgettable chapter of Emily's life, but the memory of that night, the whispered plea, the creak of leather, the calm fury in Bear's eyes, never truly left her. The diner, once a flickering neon relic of the highway, had slowly become a symbol of safety, a small sanctuary where travelers, bikers, and locals gathered not just for coffee and pie, but for a feeling of belonging that was hard to find in the world beyond those dusty windows. Emily was no longer the timid waitress who once trembled behind the counter. She had grown stronger, more confident, her spirit tempered by gratitude and courage. With the money she'd saved and a small loan from the diner's owner, she eventually took over the place herself, repainting the faded walls, fixing the broken jukebox, and hanging a wooden sign above the door that read Angel's Rest Café. No one questioned the name, but those who knew the story smiled knowingly when they read it. Underneath the counter, she kept the old napkin holder where Bear's reflection had once glinted that fateful night, a silent reminder that sometimes protection comes from the most unexpected souls. One summer evening, the sun melted into the horizon, painting the sky gold and crimson, when the distant growl of engines rolled over the hills like thunder returning to claim the earth. Emily looked up from wiping the counter, her heart skipping as headlights appeared on the empty road. A dozen bikes pulled into the parking lot, their chrome shining, their riders older but unmistakable, and among them, stepping off his Harley with the same steady presence, was Bear. His beard was grayer, his jacket more worn, but his eyes still carried that quiet strength she remembered. For a moment, neither spoke. The diner went silent except for the faint hum of the ceiling fan. Then Emily broke into a smile, one that said more than words ever could, and Bear nodded, taking his usual seat by the window. "Coffee and apple pie?" she asked softly. "You remembered," he replied with a rare grin. They talked long into the night, sharing stories of roads traveled, people helped, and the strange way fate weaves lives together like tire tracks on endless asphalt. When the clock struck midnight, Bear handed her a small, weathered box. Inside was a silver pendant shaped like a winged wheel, the symbol of his chapter. "You've earned this," he said simply. "You stood your ground. You kept the light on." Emily's hands shook as she clasped it, realizing what it meant. She wasn't just someone they had protected, she had become one of them in spirit. As dawn broke, the bikers mounted their Harleys again, engines roaring to life in a chorus that shook the quiet morning. Bear turned to her one last time and said, "Keep the coffee hot, Angel. We'll be back." And with that, they rode off into the sunrise, leaving behind the echo of freedom in the wind. From that day forward, every traveler who stopped at Angel's Rest Cafe would notice the sound of motorcycles passing by in the distance, a comforting reminder that somewhere out there, the road still carried men like Bear, watching over the lost and the lonely. And whenever the wind rattled the diner's sign, Emily would smile, because she knew that the world might be dark and cruel, but there would always be those who chose to fight for the light, even if they rode through the night wearing leather and carrying the name of angels.